Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to today's Play Attention webinar. My name is Gwen Sorley, and I will be your host today. I appreciate all you taking out time of your day to talk a little bit more about ADHD and the art of decision making. And I think this is a really important topic. I've been working in the area of ADHD and executive function and neurotechnology for about 30 years. In fact, I've been using Play Attention with my clients since 1996, so for about 28 years. And this does seem to be a reoccurring topic. Indecision. Why can I not make decisions? So you may be here because you experience this. Perhaps your child experiences this or your partner. I actually watched this firsthand, and that was a couple of weeks ago. A group of us went out for dinner, and one of our friends is a chef. He is a great chef. He is passionate about food and he loves food. And he does have ADHD. While we were at dinner, he could not decide what to order for dinner. Seems like it should be a very simple decision, especially for a chef. But you could see it was a real struggle for him. And you could see as the waiter kept coming back to see if we were ready to make our order, he was getting anxious. And at the end, he did make a decision, but it seemed like he just made an impulsive decision. I'm not really sure that he actually ordered what he wanted. I'm certain many of you here can actually relate to that story. Did you know that today you are going to make about 35,000 decisions? Did you realize that? And if you have a child, your child is going to make approximately 3,000 decisions today. That's a lot of decisions. So no wonder we are sometimes overwhelmed. Now, most of those decisions are made subconsciously, but that's still a lot of decisions. Now, many of us are about halfway through our day today, so I want you to use the chat box now and tell me, what decisions have you struggled with today? Let's go ahead and share some of our experiences today. What decisions have you struggled with? Maybe it was a really small decision that you had to make, like what size coffee you should order this morning. Or maybe it's a big decision, like should I make a career change? Maybe it's not you, maybe it's your child who every single morning cannot decide what to wear, even though she knows that she's going to have to make that decision in the morning. Maybe it's your partner. What struggles have occurred today? You're about halfway through your day, maybe more if you're here from Europe or other areas, but you've probably already made about 15,000 decisions. What struggles came up? Kristen says, what to focus on right now. I have 10 pending tasks and 3 are important and urgent. Very good. We're going to talk about that, Kristen, in just a moment. Anne says whether to hit the snooze button. Kelly, very similar. When to get up out of bed. Danielle, how to best prioritize my time, my to-do list without getting distracted by other things. Should I or shouldn't I press the snooze again and risk running late? The snooze button seems to be a recurring theme. And prioritizing, Danielle, you're right in line with what we're going to be talking about. Cecilia says what to wear, what time to exercise today. Mara says, should I keep my afternoon plans or cancel on my friends? Toby, where to put things away, which order to do things. Sarah, what to eat for breakfast. Charlotte, which route should I take to work? David, I struggled to join the webinar. Another good decision finally made, David. Cecilia, what to plan for dinner. Uh, when I go out to remove 2 bags of recycling, bring in large bag, shoes delivered, rain expected. John, whether to receive more vaccinations. There are a lot of decisions here, and some of them were very similar. And you can see We may not have had huge decisions, but there were a lot of little decisions. And like many of you said, Danielle said, how do I prioritize? How do I decide what to start with when I have so many tasks at hand? And Kathleen says, should I play one more game on my phone? So many decisions. I hope you see just with that little experiment how similar you are to others here today, that you all are struggling with making decisions. Indecision is not a modern day phenomenon. It's something that has challenged humanity for centuries. In fact, one of the earliest discussions or philosophical discussions on making decisions was in the 14th century by Jean Buridan. He did a thought experiment that is known as Buridan's donkey, and it illustrates the struggle of making a decision. In this tale, a hypothetical donkey is standing in between two equally appealing bales of hay, and the donkey cannot decide which bale of hay he wants to eat from first. Eventually, the poor donkey dies of starvation due to his indecision. Do any of you feel at times like that indecisive donkey? You can raise your hand, use the raise your hand icon if you feel like that indecisive donkey at times. Yeah, many of you are saying that you do feel like that indecisive donkey. And although Buridan's donkey is centuries old, it really does clearly illustrate the struggles we have when it comes to making a decision, especially if you have ADHD. You may not be standing in between two bales of hay, but you still have that feeling of being paralyzed, not being able to make a decision because you're overwhelmed with all of the information at hand or because of conflicting priorities. Now, when there is chronic indecision, I'm sure many of you can relate to the list here, especially for individuals with ADHD. It can lead to anxiety and stress, procrastination, overwhelm, and decision fatigue. Do any of you just feel mentally drained because you feel like there are so many decisions that need to be made? You have decreased self esteem because you can't understand why it seems so difficult. But as you see today, you're not alone. There are so many other people who struggle with making decisions. You may have missed opportunities, strained relationships, impulsiveness as a response to pressure. Kind of like what I mentioned about my friend just impulsively deciding what to order for dinner and not really certain that it was what he wanted. And so all of this is really challenging. And Teresa, this is live, and we will send the recording later. All right. So, do some of you experience these different stressors when it comes to making a decision? And you may be here because you really don't understand why. So, today we'll explore why decision making can be so tough, particularly for those with ADHD. And we'll also talk about strategies to help you overcome this timeless challenge. Indecision may be a centuries old problem, but the tools and techniques we'll discuss today can help you navigate the decision making process with clarity and confidence. Let's first look at the science behind ADHD and indecision. When we look at the decision-making process, it's important that we understand individuals with ADHD experience impairments in executive function, which plays a vital role in decision-making. Now, I know many of you here today are very familiar with executive function. But for those of you who are not as familiar, you can think of executive function as kind of like the CEO of your brain. It's what allows you to control your attention, your behaviors, your emotions. It allows you to plan and prioritize, organize, avoid procrastination, and remain on task. It's a set of mental processes that helps you complete tasks every day. One of those tasks being decision making. And we know that individuals, both children and adults, about 95% of children and adults with ADHD also have weak executive function. So it's critical we understand how executive function plays a role in the decision-making process. Let's unpack that decision-making process and look at 5 different steps in that process. Each step may be a little bit more challenging because of ADHD, but understanding where challenges lie can help us develop strategies to overcome them. The very first step is identifying the decision to be made. This requires attention and focus. May seem very simple, right? We just have to identify the decision to be made. However, if you have ADHD, does your day start like this? I know that it does because for many of you, you talked about there are too many tasks. How do I prioritize? And that's what we're talking about here. You have all of these tasks in the beginning of your day. You sit down and you look at the tasks at hand. You have to respond to email. There's an important phone call you need to make. You have to decide what to have for dinner. And you also have to pay some bills. So now you have all of these tasks and you're getting distracted by all of the information. So it's becoming difficult for you to prioritize and decide where to start. So now your attention starts bouncing in between tasks and you do a little bit of this task and a little bit of that task, but you're not really completing anything. And then you impulsively search out that instant gratification, right? And you start looking at your social media, and suddenly you're on a task that really should not take priority. So by the end of the day, you've bounced around so much. Now you're overwhelmed, you're fatigued, and you have completed very little. This is challenging. The challenge in this first step, ADHD can lead to indecision at this stage, where multiple small decisions are competing for attention, making it hard to pinpoint the most important one. And I think that's what Danielle brought up very first thing when we were talking about making decisions. The next step is gathering relevant information. This requires strong working memory. Working memory is a process within executive function. You can think of working memory as kind of like your mental sticky note. It's where you take in information and you hold that information on your mental sticky note in order to complete a task. However, if you have ADHD, you may find that in the process, you get distracted and you start looking at irrelevant information. You start going down the wrong path, and it really challenges your working memory. Let's look at our child here, Sarah. Now, Sarah is she's made the first step. She's one of our students and she's made the first step. She has decided that she is going to do her school project on penguins. So she sits down and she starts the next step in the process, which is gathering all of the relevant information that she needs on penguins to make her project great. So she's searching, she's gathering that information, she's storing it in her working memory, but suddenly, as she's looking for all that relevant information, she comes across a really cute video on koala bears. And she watches that video on koala bears. And as she's watching that koala bear video, she then sees a video on pandas, and then she sees a video on giraffes, and then tigers. And as she continues this process, now she's watched a variety of animal videos for about 30 minutes. And at the end of that time, she can no longer remember any of the relevant information she had gathered on penguins. She doesn't know where they live. She doesn't know what they eat. All of that information she was trying to store in working memory is lost because she's gotten distracted. She has too much information, and now her working memory is compromised. And she ends up overwhelmed, fatigued, and this project, she now realizes, is going to take a lot longer than it should. This is the challenge in this part of the process. For individuals with ADHD, staying focused on gathering relevant information can be difficult. Your attention may wander, and your working memory struggles to keep important facts in mind, causing frustration and making the task take much longer than it should. Let's look at the next step in the process, evaluating alternatives. This requires cognitive flexibility. Okay, this is where you have narrowed it down to a couple of different options, and now it's important that you are cognitively flexible so that you can weigh the pros and cons of each option. You have to be able to shift perspectives and consider various outcomes. So imagine you're car shopping. I am certain all of you can relate to this process. Imagine you are car shopping. And when you are car shopping, you have finally narrowed it down to two different cars. One car is really fuel efficient, and it's a little bit smaller. It also doesn't have very much technology. It doesn't have a lot of new features, but it is fuel efficient. The other car is less eco-friendly. However, it has all of the latest technology features, and it is very, very comfortable. So now it's time for you to be mentally flexible and start weighing the pros and cons of each car. But as you start looking at that first car, you get fixated on the efficiency of that car, the fuel efficiency of that car. And now you're stuck. You are hyper focused on the fact that this car is fuel efficient, and down the road, it may save you a lot of money. And so then you go back to the other car and you try to evaluate the pros of that car, but you can't because you're stuck. You are stuck on that one point, which is fuel efficiency. So now you're getting a little anxious and you impulsively decide, I'm going to go with that first car because it's fuel efficient. And as you drive off the lot, you suddenly realize that you didn't give yourself time to really fully evaluate the pros of the other car, which was much more comfortable and had a lot more technology features that may have suited your needs better. So it's important that we stay cognitively flexible so that we can thoroughly evaluate the pros and cons of each option and don't get mentally stuck in one area. For individuals with ADHD, that cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift focus and evaluate different outcomes, can be limited, leading to difficulty comparing your options. This often results in either impulsive decisions or analysis paralysis, where no decision gets made because you are overwhelmed by the number of factors to consider. Okay. I'm wondering now if these are resonating with you. Keep in mind, we're going through all of these steps so that we can have some clarity in this process. Making the decision is the fourth step in decision making. And it does require, as we just mentioned, it requires controlling impulsivity and avoiding procrastination. So now imagine that your lease is running out on your apartment. You have to move. It's not an option. You have to move. So you spend a couple of weeks looking at your different options. You tour several different apartments and you narrow it down again to two options. One apartment is very small, but it is in a vibrant neighborhood, and that is really appealing. The other apartment is much larger, but it's a little bit further away from amenities. So you are looking at both of your options, and now your lease is about to run out. Your time is running out. You know you need to make a decision. And instead of taking a little bit more time to thoroughly evaluate, you impulsively go with that one decision and you go for the apartment that's smaller, but it's in that vibrant neighborhood because that seems like the easier decision to make. And then once you start moving in and you're living there, you quickly realize that it is so small, it is pretty uncomfortable for daily life. And you probably should have taken some time to evaluate the larger environment. Now, the opposite is true too. You might procrastinate, right? You just put off making a decision, thinking maybe if I somehow put off this decision, it will resolve itself. Well, you put off making that decision too long. And then because you've put that decision off so long, someone else takes the apartment you really wanted. And now your choices are limited. You really have no choice now, and you feel like you have a missed opportunity. The challenge, ADHD, often causes that impulsiveness where decisions are made too quickly to avoid feeling overwhelmed, or procrastination, where the fear of making the wrong choice leads to inaction. This either results in regret over rushed decisions or missed opportunities due to delay. Finally, we get to the fifth step, and that's reflecting on the outcome. This requires self monitoring. Remember, all of these steps, working memory, self monitoring, these are all processes within executive function. So, this is where we learn from past decisions, and this can often be compromised by ADHD. Let's say that you are offered a new job and that new job is at a higher pay rate. So you're going to be making more money, although it does have longer hours and your commute is going to be much longer. So you go ahead and you take the job because that higher pay really is appealing to you, but you don't consider the long commute and the longer hours. And as you get into the job, yes, you are getting some benefits from the additional money. However, your personal life is really being challenged. You no longer have time for friends and family. You're feeling stressed and anxious. You no longer have time for your hobbies. You're not exercising. So that longer commute and the longer hours in the day really have not made your life more fulfilling. It wasn't really worth the pay increase because you no longer have that work life balance. And because it's uncomfortable to reflect on the decision process and how you came to that decision, you avoid reflecting and self monitoring. If you don't do this, if you don't reflect, because we all make mistakes when we make decisions, right? We've all made a bad decision. And if we don't take the time to evaluate how we came to the wrong decision and what we can improve next time, then we get into this cycle where we continue to make poor decisions. So it is critical that after every decision, good or bad, you can self reflect, self monitor, think about the things you did well and how to incorporate those in further decisions, but also reflect on what you could improve. The challenge, ADHD can make it hard to pause and reflect on decisions, leading to repeated mistakes or dissatisfaction. Taking the time to self monitor and reflect could help you learn from your experience and make better decisions next time. So, this is why strengthening executive function is key. At every stage, executive function plays a critical role. So it is so important that we're able to improve focus, impulse control, working memory, and cognitive flexibility. Now, some of you here may be wondering, well, I don't really know if I am more impulsive than my peers. Is that really one of the challenges I have? And that's why decision making is so hard? Or perhaps you're not really sure if your child is truly more distracted than any other average 9-year old. And so, if you want to look a little bit further, I didn't put a slide in here because I was just thinking about some of you may want to have further assessments to pinpoint these areas and what your challenges are, where the challenges lie for your child or your partner. So we do have a few different assessments available. And one is our ADHD assessment online, but that's just a series of questions. It's very good. It helps us pinpoint different cognitive skills we want to improve. But if you want a more in-depth look, we do have two different assessments available. And I think it's important to talk about those here because we're talking about how, if we can pinpoint the challenges that are affecting the decision making process, then we can make changes, we can make a plan. So, the two different assessments we have available, one is called Focus, which is a norm reference test of attentional control. It's computer based. It takes about 20 minutes. At the end of the 20 minutes, we receive a full report that tells us how you performed compared to the performance of your peers. So we look at four different constructs of attention. We look at performance, consistency, impulse control, and your ability to deal with distractors, both auditory and visual. The other we have is called the brief, and that is a behavior rating inventory of executive function. That is a series of questions, and it helps us get a better picture. It's based on experience and observation, so it gives us an overall picture of the areas of executive function that are most challenging for you or your partner or your child. So, those are two different assessments we do have available. And if you are interested in looking at those assessments further, they're typically $50 a piece, and then we need about 40-minute block of time to review the results with you. But in order to not make a decision, I'll let you know that you can get both of those for $50, and we'll do that follow up with you. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the assessment part, go ahead and type assessments, and someone will follow up with you to talk about those assessments and that process a little bit further. That's just something that I thought might be a good option for you if you're really unclear about where the challenges lie. It will help us pinpoint those challenges a little bit better. So let's look at strategies for more efficient and less stressful decision making. I hope that you'll look at these strategies and make it a plan to have one take home. What is one strategy you feel you can take away today and make that decision making process a little bit easier? Okay. Don't try to take them all on because that'll be too much. Let's start small and gradually build up from there. So, first of all, simplifying your choices. If you develop routines and systems, to maximize, or I'm sorry, not maximize, to minimize the number of decisions you have to make. This will free up some mental space. So remember earlier when we were talking about maybe your child has a hard time every morning deciding what to wear. So maybe that decision is made the night before. Make this a new routine where your child now decides what he's going to wear the night before. So that decision does not have to be made in the morning when there are a lot of other pressing priorities that and decisions that need to be made. Take that off his plate. Make the decision the night before, and then that decision doesn't have to be made in the hustle and bustle of the morning. That's a great routine. That's simple. We can start there. Or maybe you do meal planning because maybe you find that you waste so much time trying to decide what to have for lunch that your lunchtime is over by the time you decide what to eat. So take Sunday night and do some meal prep. Prep all of your lunches, pack your lunches for the entire week so that, or work week at least, so you don't have to make that decision. Clear up some of that mental space for yourself. The next strategy you can incorporate is set decision-making criteria. This art of establishing clear criteria helps make the process easier. So establish clear criteria to make the process easier. One thing you can do is have a 5-minute timer. Now, you only want to do this if it's a small decision and you find that you're just spending way too much time on a very small, insignificant decision. This might be for you or it might be for your child. Set a timer to 5 minutes and make it a goal to make that decision within 5 minutes. No questions asked. If you're making a larger decision, like a career change or deciding on which job to take, then narrow it down to 3 criteria. Because remember, when you're gathering information, you might get lost by lots of irrelevant information. So set it up so that you only have 3 criteria to look at. If you can establish clear criteria, it'll make the decision-making process easier. Next, you can create decision-making routines. So have that daily checklist. And so when you know you're going to have a variety of tasks, remember our initial slide that we looked at where we had so many different tasks that needed to be done? There are going to be some repeats, right? So have a daily checklist, and that will get you started. I'm going to start every day checking my email, then making any phone calls, and then paying bills, and then I can move on with my day. So have some type of checklist to help you at least get started. Or you might opt for a decision-making template when you're making larger decisions. If you do a search, don't do it now, but if you do a search later and you look for decision-making templates or apps, there are a lot of really good templates and some really good apps out there to help you make decisions. And this will help reduce cognitive load. You can also practice delayed gratification to manage impulsivity. So remember the first slide, or the second, I think it was, we were setting a timer for small decisions for 5 minutes. We have to make this decision within 5 minutes because it's a small decision. It's not really that significant. But at times when we want to reduce impulsivity, it may be helpful for you to have that decision and then set a timer for 10 minutes, really forcing yourself to take a break before you make that decision. If you set that timer to 10 minutes and you tell yourself you cannot make a decision until that 10 minutes has elapsed, then it may give you a little bit of time to pause and actually evaluate the right decision a little bit further. And even if you just take some time to take a deep breath, count to 10, and then make your decision. If it's a larger decision you need to make, then create a buffer time. So not 10 minutes, it's a large decision. Set 2 to 3 days aside and tell yourself, I am not going to make a decision for 2 to 3 days. So when we do that assessment and we chat with you about impulse control, if impulsivity is difficult for you, if it's one of those challenges in that assessment process, then let's look at incorporating some of these into your daily routine. And finally, delegate decisions when possible. I know this is really difficult for a lot of us because we feel like we have to make the decisions all the time. Or maybe you sometimes feel like you're the only one that can make the right decision. Relax on some of those decisions and start delegating when possible. Look to other team members at work or other family members who can make certain decisions, or just simply phone a friend and make certain you reach out to others when you need help in that decision making process. Remember, you don't have to do this all on your own. I hope those really did help you. I know we just talked about 5, and some of you may have um, some other ideas that you want to share, and I know that you've been typing a lot here in the chat box, and I will spend some time at the end of the webinar to share some of your feedback. So if you do have other ideas that you want to share with the group, go ahead and type those in because those are always helpful for other people who are here. Okay. So, in summary, remember, you may feel like that indecisive donkey, but challenges in executive function make decision making difficult for individuals with ADHD. And when we can understand that, when we can understand the process and where our challenges lie, then we can start taking steps to improve executive function and make that decision making process a little bit easier. So, how many of you resonated with this slide? Do you feel anxiety and stress? Are you procrastinating all the time? If you have other feelings that have come up because of your indecisiveness, go ahead and share those. And I know it can be difficult, but we can take those steps, start incorporating some of those strategies. And then we also need to look at getting to the root cause and starting to develop executive function. And that's what we do within Play Attention. So, as we provide you with tips and strategies, I want you to have all of those tips and strategies because they're important. But in order for those tips and strategies to work for you, we need to simultaneously develop executive function. And we do this skill building in a really unique way. Some of you may have seen our body wave technology. You see my graphic here where he's wearing our body wave armband on his arm. That body wave armband on the back has 3 sensors. And when I slide this armband on my arm, those sensors are now monitoring my brain activity that tells us how attentive I am. And then that information is given over to the computer where I'm allowed to control all of the cognitive exercises just with my mind, or more specifically, my attention alone. And I receive constant and immediate feedback as to whether or not I truly am focused and paying attention. And when we develop your customized plan, we're working on developing the foundation of executive function. So we're going to work on cognitive skills such as sustained attention, filtering distractions, task completion. When we can develop all of those foundational skills and develop that cognitive control, we're getting to the root cause and we are strengthening all of those mental processes within executive function. So we take a very systematic way to develop cognitive control and improve executive function. Because keep in mind, when you are working on Play Attention, you're actually activating all of the cognitive exercises utilizing your attentive state. And again, you get that constant and immediate feedback as to whether or not you truly are focused and paying attention. And the reason we do this is because we know the very first catalyst required for brain change is attention. You can have a great counselor, you can have a great teacher, but if you're having a hard time paying attention to that individual or that process, then it's really difficult to get maximum benefit. So that's why we make certain that no matter what you're working on, you are actively engaged. And that's the power of neurotechnology. We can give you immediate feedback regarding your attention and develop and strengthen executive function as we work through that process. So I do hope, and I am going to share some of the feedback that you've had here. But as I'm going through your different questions or feedback that you've had, I want to talk about some next steps as well. I do hope one of the very first steps you take before you leave this presentation is just make a decision on one takeaway. What are you going to take away from today to alleviate that analysis paralysis? What are you going to do to alleviate some of the stressors that are caused by inattention? Are you going to maybe lay out your clothes the night before? Are you going to start some meal prepping? Are you going to look for some decision-making apps or templates that you can start using? What are you going to take away from today? One thing at least that you can take away and start using yourself, start using with your child or your partner to make the decision-making process easier. I do hope that even just talking about that process and how executive function plays a role in that process, you have a clearer understanding of why it's challenging and some steps you can take to improve. So let's talk about some next steps. You can take our online ADHD test that I mentioned. It just asks a variety of questions and gives a summary of some cognitive skills that we think you could benefit from. Many of you here today may have already taken taken that ADHD test. If you do want a little bit more information on the two different assessments we discussed, Focus, which is a norm reference test of attentional control, and also the brief, which is a behavior rating inventory of executive function. Those are a little bit more in depth, and they will take some time, about 20 minutes each to go through. And then remember, we'll need about a 40-minute block of time in order to review the results and discuss the different areas. So if you want more information on the assessment and you haven't yet written down assessment or type that in the chat box, make certain you do. If you want a little bit more information on play attention and how we can customize a plan to help you develop executive function and improve that decision-making process, go ahead and type consultation. Keeping in mind, though, that if you do the assessment, the consultation will come naturally after that. If you don't need the assessment and you want to go right to that consultation, just type in consultation and we'll send you our consultation schedule so that you can schedule a time that works best for you. Also, don't miss our next webinar, which is going to be with the founder of Play Attention, Peter Freer. We're going to talk about neuroplasticity unlocked. So a lot of next steps there that you can choose from. I do hope that you'll take opportunity to write down what you would like your next steps to be. And I do appreciate, as I mentioned, I'm going to go back and read some of your feedback, but I do hope that you've enjoyed today. I hope you have some takeaways from today's presentation, and I really do appreciate your time and attention.